Hi, my name is Alex Dolphin and welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case of Mannilo versus Gorski. This case was heard in the Supreme Court in New Jersey in the year 1969. Let's go ahead and jump into the facts of the case. Mannilo in this case was the plaintiff and Gorski is the defendant. The two were neighbors with one another. Gorski had a home and her son built an addition on that home for her. That addition got really close to the property line between Mannilo and Gorski, so close that the stairs coming out of Gorski's addition actually did come onto Mannilo's land by about a 15-inch span, so very small, not super noticeable. When Mannilo did notice, though, that it was on their property, Mannilo decided, hey, this is trespass. I'm going to bring suit against you. You need to get your stairs off my property. They wanted an injunction. Gorski's defense is what we're going to mostly talk about, and that's that Gorski had attained property rights to that 15-inch portion through adverse possession. So there's 4 prongs of adverse possession. The 2 prongs that we're going to discuss in this case is that the adverse possession has to be open and notorious, and then second, that it has to be adverse and under a claim of right. So those are the 2 prongs that we're going to focus on because those are the 2 prongs that the court focuses on in this decision. So the issue at hand is, does Gorski have property rights to these 15 inches where the stairs were through adverse possession? So the first portion of adverse possession that the court decides is whether or not Gorski had to know that when she built those stairs that they were on the property of Mannilo. So that's the first question. There's 2 doctrines that the court discusses. First, the main doctrine, and second, the Connecticut doctrine. The main doctrine says that the adverse possession actually has to be adverse. They have to say, this is my property. I believe wholeheartedly it's my property. And that's all that matters. You know, they can't, in the main doctrine, someone can't come on and try and adverse possess property if they know that someone else actually owns the property. That's the main doctrine. The court ultimately says we're going to toss the main doctrine to the side, and most common courts have now as well. And they rest their doctrine for the 4th prong of adverse possession underneath the Connecticut doctrine. The Connecticut doctrine doesn't look into the motives or the understanding of the adverse possessor. It just looks into the actions. So Gorski in this case, yeah, she totally satisfied adverse possession. She built the stairs on the property. It doesn't matter if she knew that it was Mannilo's property or not, because under the Connecticut doctrine of adverse possession, we're not going to look and try and discern her motives and her understandings of the property. We're just going to say, okay, she built stairs there. She was obviously trying to adversely possess this property. So Gorski wins on the first prong, and her defense looks like it's holding up well. Then the court turns to this question of whether the trespassing, whether the adverse possession was open and notorious. That's a key facet of adverse possession. Was it open and notorious? And in this case, the court says, because it was only 15 inches on Mannilo's property, it's not open or notorious. Mannilo really couldn't have noticed that unless he had a surveyor come out and survey the property. And even then, he might have a hard time seeing that. It's only 15 inches. So it's a difficult thing to see. So the court says, ultimately to satisfy this prong of her defense, Gorski's defense, we got to see, does Gorski's steps being there, did Mannilo actually know that those stairs were on his property? Did Mannilo know that those stairs were the 15 inches on the property? So they go ahead and remand the decision. They say, hey, the instant court, the court of fact, you guys need to try and figure out whether or not Mannilo knew that those stairs were on their property. If Mannilo knew those stairs were on the property, then the adverse possession claim of Gorski has a lot more ground to stand on. And so that's what the court ultimately remands on. So that's the case. That's the summary. That's what you need to know for your case brief. As far as ex ante implications, it does just reaffirm what open and notorious means in the realm of adverse possession. We don't want to let adverse possessors possess property sneakily, if that makes sense. The goal of adverse possession isn't to allow people to sneak and adversely possess property. The goal of adverse possession is to, economically use property that's not being used, and where we also want a quiet title. We want to say that, hey, there's not all this disputes about the title. Someone who's using it, they have it. That's their property. So the court, in that sense, does just reaffirm the importance of the prong of adverse possession, where it needs to be open and notorious. And the other two prongs, in case you were wondering, of adverse possession. So the 4 prongs in total. The entry has to be actual and exclusive. It has to be open and notorious. It has to be continuous for a statutory period, and it has to be adverse and under a claim of right. So we considered 2 and 4 because they just said that the entry was actual and exclusive, and it was continuous for the statutory period. So that's why we had 2 and 4 in this case. Yeah, so I like this decision because it just gets rid of the incentive for sneaky people to try and slowly encroach upon the property. The court does discuss another decision where, hey, people that do kind of slowly encroach, they might actually have a right to that property, but that's beyond the scope of this case, so that's not really what I fully want to discuss here. But as far as adverse possession, I think the key to take from this case is that, one, the Connecticut doctrine is reaffirmed by this court here in New Jersey, that we're not going to try and look to the internal motivations and understandings of the property rights of the adverse possessor. And then 2, it has to be open and notorious. We can't just have someone come in very quietly and sneakily and adversely possess property. That goes against the grain and one of the 4 principles of adverse possession. So thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you got something useful out of it. If you did like it and you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.